Welcome to the deep dive. Today we're tackling a really fundamental human experience, perhaps the most fundamental one.
Absolutely. The one often met with, well, a lot of fear.
Exactly. What happens after the physical form dissolves. But we're looking at it differently today, not as an end.
Right. More through the lens of transformation and maybe this idea of a deep, natural, cyclic return.
Our source material for this deep dive is pretty fascinating. It's from a chapter called Death, Transformation, and the Cyclic Return.
And it offers a really unique perspective, quite an ancient one, actually, on this transition we all face eventually.
So our mission really is to unpack the key insights from these pages. Can we genuinely see death not as, a final closing, a void?
But maybe just another phase, part of a huge cosmic rhythm.
Yeah, drawing on these different ways of thinking about existence to maybe shift how we feel about it.
It's probably worth just pausing for a moment. Ask yourself, what is your current view on this? Is it just lights out?
Or could it be something else entirely?
Maybe. This deep dive, it might just crack open a surprising new angle for you.
Okay, let's get into it then. The core idea, right from the start of this source, it's a real perspective flip.
It argues quite forcefully, actually.
It does.
Yeah.
That what humans call death, cessation, the void, it isn't that at all. Fundamentally, it's presented as a transformation, a release, and crucially, a return.
hmm The narrator in the source material, who sounds like they've seen, well, a lot of cycles.
Eon's worth, it seems.
Right. They even comment on the typical human view, finding it amusing, truly. Having seen endless endings that were just beginnings in disguise.
Worlds crumbling, stars fading.
Exactly. Only for new ones to coalesce later from all that cosmic dust. So, from that viewpoint, seeing death as the final curtain call, it just feels, well, a bit limited.
It really puts our individual lives in a much bigger context. In this viewpoint, it uses this analogy of a cosmic rhythm playing within us.
Like health is harmony, being in sync with that rhythm.
Precisely. And disease is discord, a note out of tune. But even the most vibrant, perfectly tuned physical form, eventually it has to yield.
It yields to the silence, as the source calls it.
The pause between the beats.
The uncoiling, that's the key word there.
Yes, that uncoiling, that's what we call death. But it's not framed as a mistake or some kind of system failure.
No, it's a necessary beat, part of the universal symphony.
And this idea of rhythm, of exchange, it leads us straight to Walter Russell. He features pretty heavily in the source's argument.
He does. Russell saw the whole universe as this perpetual process, a constant, rhythmic, balanced interchange, always giving and re-giving.
So for him, death wasn't an interruption. It wasn't an anomaly.
Not at all. It was a completely natural, totally integrated phase of the cosmic cycle. He had a really specific way of describing what actually happens.
The compressed light idea.
Exactly. He saw death as the release of compressed light. Now, that might sound a bit, abstract.
Right, what does that mean?
Well, he meant the energy in light that was patterned, conditioned by consciousness and rhythm, to actually form the physical body.
Okay, so the body is like coiled up light and energy, a temporary vessel.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And in death, that specific pattern, that conditioned energy, it's released. It returns to the universal field.
Back to that vibrant sea of potential, the 0 point, sometimes it's called.
Precisely. Back to where it emerged from in the first place.
So the physical form itself, it dissolves, it scatters back to the elements, sure, but the underlying substance.
The light, the energy.
And crucially, the consciousness or awareness that animated it.
That doesn't just wink out of existence. According to Russell, it continues.
Okay.
The source uses some really helpful analogies here, makes it more concrete. Think of a wave.
Okay, a wave rising from the ocean.
Right. It holds its shape for a bit. It's a distinct form. You can see it.
Yeah.
But then what happens?
It crashes, dissolves back into the water.
Exactly. It rejoins the ocean. Its energy is still there, ready to form new waves. The specific wave,
And that atman, that spark, passes between different physical bodies.
driven by karma, the whole cause and effect of actions and intentions across lifetimes. And the ultimate goal is moksha, liberation from that cycle.
How do you get liberation?
By realizing the Atman's true nature, its oneness with Brahman. But the key point for our discussion, aligning with Russell, is how they see the body.
Just temporary.
Exactly.
No.
Literally described sometimes as a garment for the eternal Atman. The Atman persists, just shedding one garment, one body for another.
Okay. Now, Buddhism, it approaches this quite differently, doesn't it? Which the source makes clear is important.
Very different, yeah. Buddhism rejects the idea of a permanent, unchanging soul or self. That's the concept of anatta, or no self.
But wait, it still talks about rebirth. How does that work without a soul moving between bodies?
It seems like a contradiction at first, you're right, but it's understood differently. It's not a fixed thing moving. It's the continuity of a process.
A process, like what?
Like a stream of consciousness. Think energetic patterns, mental habits, karmic momentum, like ripples carrying forward.
Ah, okay. So when a physical form dissolves, this stream, this momentum.
It conditions and gives rise to a new existence. It's cause and effect playing out across lives. Not a little soul entity hopping houses. It's more subtle.
So even though Hinduism talks about a soul entity cycling through and Buddhism talks about this stream of process causing continuity, the source is highlighting something they share.
Exactly. Despite those significant differences about the self, they both land somewhere similar on death itself.
Which is?
That the dissolution of the physical body isn't annihilation. It's not the end point. It's a release, a transition, a return to a less manifest state before conditions gather for a new manifestation.
So for both, life and death are just interwoven phases in a perpetual cycle.
Absolutely. Which lines up beautifully with Russell's principle of rhythmic exchange, giving form and energy in life, and then re-giving, releasing that energy and substance in death, which then fuels the potential for the next cycle.
And connecting these ancient ideas in Russell's physics, the source also brings in something more contemporary and, well, pretty intriguing.
Near-death experiences, NDEs.
Right. Those accounts from people who've been, right on the brink of death, clinically dead sometimes, and then came back. Glimpses beyond the veil, as the source puts it.
And people report these remarkably consistent things, don't they? Across cultures, across time.
Like what specifically?
Well, the feeling of floating outside the body, seeing things they couldn't possibly see physically, visions of intense, brilliant light, overwhelming feelings of peace, love, unity.
Encounters with deceased relatives or other beings often described as benevolent.
Yes, that too. Accessing vast knowledge, sometimes a life review happening in an instant, a sense of timelessness, and maybe most profoundly, this powerful feeling that their consciousness, their awareness, was existing completely independently of their physical brain.
Now, there's definitely scientific debate around this. Could it be neurological, hallucinations triggered by a dying brain?
Of course, and the source acknowledges that debate, but it also leans into the subjective reports themselves, the sheer consistency.
Across so many different people.
Right. The source argues that consistency speaks compellingly of consciousness continuing its journey, regardless of the exact mechanism.
So whether you see them as definitive proof or just fascinating anomalies.
The source frames them as potential hints, maybe whispers from the very edge of life cycle. And they certainly seem to resonate with that older idea of consciousness returning to some kind of source.
Like postcards sent back from the Great Return. That's a lovely phrase from the source.
Isn't it? It captures that feeling of a glimpse beyond.
Now, the source also presents an even, more ancient perspective from a viewpoint claiming to have witnessed these cycles for basically forever.
Yeah, this perspective doesn't see death as an anomaly or something to be feared. It calls this understanding the fundamental nature of the cosmos, the way of all things.
It uses a really powerful metaphor, too, doesn't it?
The dragon metaphor, yes. Witnessing these ancient beings when their time in a particular physical form is up, simply shedding it.
And their energy, their consciousness.
It doesn't just vanish. The immense energy disperses back into that vast cosmic potential we talked about. And the consciousness, it doesn't end. It merges back into the great stream of the universal one.
Only to potentially gather again later, drawn back by the cosmic rhythm and its own momentum.
Exactly. Perhaps in a different form, maybe in a different age entirely. Life, from this viewpoint, is the gathering, the coiling, the charging of light and energy into form.
And death.
Death is the necessary release, the uncoiling, the discharging of that energy back into the potential.
So it's not an ending, it's a crucial transformation. Like
a breath taken before the next inhalation of creation, as the source puts it, the next dance of form. The universe itself is seen as eternal, just this perpetual process of becoming and unbecoming.
And everything within it, every spark of consciousness, every pattern of light is just part of this endless rhythmic dance.
When you start to think about death that way, not as total annihilation, but as this profound transformation, this return to the source, a necessary phase.
The source suggests this perspective can really lessen the fear, right? The terror and sting we usually associate with it.
Definitely. There's that brief, kind of provocative line in the source. It mentions scholars might see ancient tales about this stuff as just metaphors.
But then it adds,
Pointedly, metaphors bite.
implying there's a reality to it, that these ideas about transformation and return aren't just abstract symbols, they actually impact existence.
Yeah, it seems to be the implication.
Yeah.
That there's a fundamental truth, maybe a lived reality behind the symbolism.
And when you see death through that lens as part of this ongoing process,
It loses a lot of its power to frighten. It just reveals itself as, well, another majestic natural turn of the cosmic wheel.
so bringing all these threads together, it's quite a tapestry the source weaves.
It really is.
Yeah.
You've got Walter Russell's scientific or perhaps pseudoscientific vision of energy returning to the source.
You've got these ancient wisdom traditions contemplating cycles of rebirth and consciousness for thousands of years.
And then you have this intriguing modern resonance in NDE accounts, debated as they are.
It all points towards a really profound alternative perspective, doesn't it? That existence isn't just this one-way street ending in oblivion.
No. It suggests it's more like an eternal rhythmic dance of consciousness and form, a perpetual transformation constantly playing out within this boundless universal one.
Okay. So to wrap up, we want to leave you with something to really mull over, a thought drawn directly from the source material.
Something that might help anchor this perspective in your own experience, maybe make it feel less abstract.
This source encourages us to just contemplate transformation in nature. Think about, say, a caterpillar. It dissolves essentially inside its chrysalis.
And becomes a butterfly, a complete change of form.
Or a seed. It sprouts, grows into a plant, lives its cycle, then dies and returns to the earth, its substance nourishing new life.
Or water, evaporating from the ocean, becoming clouds, falling as rain, flowing in rivers, back to the ocean again. Constant change of state and form.
Even on a cosmic scale, a massive star collapsing, its elements scattering through space.
Only to form new nebulae, new stars, new planets, new possibilities for life.
So try viewing these everyday natural transformations not just as endings, but as changes of form, within a continuous cycle of energy and substance.
And then consider this question. It's posed exactly like this in the source directly to you.
How does viewing these natural transformations through the lens of release and return, of energy changing its state and form but not ceasing to exist, change your feeling or perspective about the concept of death in relation to human life?
Just let that question sit with you for a while. See what comes up.